Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Thank goodness for the Winged Wheel Podcast day event, because that Panthers game was rough, man.
If it was 4 hours later, I would have fallen asleep.
Hank fell asleep in your lap, Brad.
Halfway through the first period. He was so overstimulated, I guess, by everything that had transpired in the day up to that point. He just KO'd and would not wake up till around early start of the second period.
We all had quite a bit of family come in for this one, which is really nice. So shout out to them for coming out and supporting us and seeing what all this is about. You can't really understand it until you're there for a Winged Wheel Podcast day. It's such a blast. But it was my father-in-law's first ever NHL game. And in the third period, it was after Ben Chiarot had really had it with Matthew Tkachuk and just threw down the gloves and was trying to, beat him up. That whole scrum was getting sorted out, and he leaned over to Mel and I and was like, "So, a lot of fights, huh?" We're like, "Yeah, a lot of fights today. A lot of fights, not as many goals as you're used to seeing." I kind of feel bad that was his first Red Wings game, but it was a unique game to go to.
Yeah, it was the Red Wings' first time being shut out this year, so go us.
In 2024.
Yeah.
Because they got shut out earlier this season by...
Let me guess. Florida?
The Florida Panthers. Sergei Bobrovsky. Anyhow, there's the tone of this episode is definitely going to be a lot more feet on the ground. Definitely 6 feet on the ground for this episode, but it's okay. No one's panicking, or maybe Evan is. It's really hard to judge what he's going to do on any given episode.
But I don't know where I'm at right now.
Physically and mentally.
Yes.
It's the recovery episodes after Winged Wheel Podcast nights are interesting ones. So forewarning to the listeners. And if you're a new listener, welcome to the show. We're usually a little bit more lively than this. Without further ado, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we are going to be, at the end of the show, recapping Winged Wheel Podcast Day at the LCA. It was a really great time, our 6th one ever with the Detroit Red Wings specifically, and just a blast. Really, again, nice to have that before the Panthers game. Otherwise, it would have been tough to walk away from that game. But we'll be recapping that later. First, we're going to get into the 2 Red Wings games that have happened since our last episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. The trend broke. The 6-game win streak broke, and we had 2 losses that we watched against the New York Islanders and then against the Florida Panthers. We're going to be discussing what those 2 losses mean for the playoff outlook, the projections, the standings currently, what Detroit's probabilities are. We'll get into some other notes about the Detroit Red Wings, prospects like Trey Augustine and more. Then we're going to get into the trade deadline. Tanev got traded, which was a big one. Toronto traded for Lyubushkin again, which was interesting. And then notes on what Steve Yzerman is looking for from his kind of trade deadline endeavors, more information on that. And then NHL news, the Petterson. I'm glad we got that Petterson conversation in. We ham-fisted it in because he then signed with Vancouver like a day or 2 later. So we'll talk about that and more NHL news before we get into overtime. Before all that, very quickly, I want to let you know that the Winged Wheel Podcast is supported by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to join the so-called Dub Club, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes. Additionally, you get access into all of our giveaways. We are giving away 2 tickets to every single Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going to our Patreon supporters. Additionally, you can join our Winged Wheel Podcast Discord community, which is a blast. And it also helps us run Winged Wheel Podcast nights in partnership with the Grand Rapids Griffins, as well as the Detroit Red Wings, which is now the 6th time we've done the Red Wings one, and we've done the Griffins one once, which is... We're excited to continue both of those. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation and continue to improve this show. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Well, the good news from the New York Islanders game is that Olli Maatta rubbed it in a lot of people's faces, mine included. This is his Olli Maatta Offensive Dynamo annual tradition, maybe even quarterly tradition, where he comes in and shows us that he's quite useful offensively from time to time. He gets inspired, goes below the hash marks and jumps in. But other than that, I think the takeaway from the Islanders-Red Wings game, where the Red Wings ultimately fell 5-3, is that in retrospect, that's one that Detroit wants back, in my mind.
They were due. It was what you would call a trap game. You're at the end of a heater. You had a couple of big wins, big blowout wins. You had a crazy moment with Patrick Kane in Chicago, and then you dummy Washington. You feel invincible, and you're coming in against a weaker opponent, and you forget to show up. You forget to start the game. You're sleepy. You're unmotivated, and that's what the Red Wings look like for a very large chunk of that game.
It was a classic Islanders game wherein big chunks of the game would pass and not really much would happen, and you're like, wow, yeah, it's the Islanders. This is just what the Islanders have been for so long.
Well, there were things that happened, just the referees missed them.
Look, I have thoughts on the refs these past two games, and the Florida game, my thoughts are independent of how Detroit played. Like, the refs could have done things differently, and Detroit still would have lost. But the Islanders game, that's one of those where you can categorize it as, yeah, the Red Wings shouldn't have put themselves in the position for it to be close enough to be called by the refs, but I think the needle moved on that one.
The Dana White quote, "Don't leave it in the hands of the judges." The Red Wings left it in the hand of the refs, and the refs failed them. Again, I'm in the same boat as you. I think, well, anybody who watched the games, I think it's probably a universal opinion. The reffing was horrible in both games, but in very different ways and with very different implications. I genuinely think the refs cost the Red Wings at least a point on Thursday. It was 99% of the time we sit on here and complain about officiating. We understand it's bad both ways, which was a lot of the Detroit-Florida game. They were just calling crap arbitrarily and for no reason. And that wasn't exclusively against Detroit. And you can feel however you want about that. It didn't affect the outcome of the game. It was bad. It was arbitrary. The Red Wings were getting screwed specifically against the Islanders. That was a very one-sided officiating display. Again, before people throw out things we're not saying, there's no conspiracy. The refs did not want the Islanders to win. This is just good old-fashioned referees being bad at their jobs.
To go through the game, the Islanders scored twice in the first period. The first one, the Brock Nelson goal, to me, that was kind of a little bit of a warning sign that maybe Detroit was a little off. That puck was kind of moving around, heading towards Detroit's net in the slot area, and it was on Chiarot's stick at one point, and Nelson took it off and fired it home. Casey Cizikas scored the second goal in the first period, and then Detroit was down 2-0. Going into the second. Olli Maatta scored the first of his two goals in the second to make it 2-1, and then Patrick Kane headed into the third period, tied it 10 seconds in, actually, from Larkin and Petry. That extended his point streak to 10 games, which is where it ultimately ended. And then Brock Nelson scored again to make it 3-2, and that's where you kind of got the sense that this just wasn't Alex Lyon's night. Not a terrible shot, but I think one that if Lyon could do it over, like the positioning would have been a little bit more sound where he wouldn't have had to, kind of pinch his shoulder up or kind of struggle to make that save, which he ultimately didn't. Olli Maatta scores once again, his fourth goal of the season. Gostisbehere sprung on the assist to tie it, and you're like, okay, Detroit, not their cleanest game, a little disjointed, some defensive lapses. They're not playing as well as they did against, St. Louis, for example, but they're still in this game, and New York's not walking all over them. And then Barzal scored. That it just wasn't Lyon's night.
That whole sequence of events from Maatta getting tripped and no call to Christian Fischer immediately doing a hook, and it was a hook, but that getting called for whatever reason. Lyon losing the puck in the crease on, I think it was still on the power play. I can't remember if the time ran out yet. But he just lost the puck in his crease. It ends up in the corner, and by the time he tracked where it was, Barzal had already banked it off him. That was a tough scene all around. I think we've gotten better, and I know I have, about being pretty even-keeled even when things are going bad. That was a 2-minute stretch where the blood started to boil a little bit about how everything went down. And then you remember, we're coming off a 6-game winning streak. It's fine. One loss isn't going to be the end of the world. Maybe they'll come back. They didn't. But at least it was nice having
losses?
that. Yeah. They didn't, but it was nice having that belief that it might happen. Haven't had that in a while.
Yeah, like even going down into the next period, at no point was they're out of this. Florida was a different feeling a little bit, but we'll get into that. Olli Maatta, though, I want to say I've lumped him in a lot with Hall and Petry in terms of guys who have just been rotating among those 5, 6, 7 spots for Detroit. And I think, in fairness, Maatta has been down there a lot. I think his one-on-one defensive play has been quite poor this year. You've seen him miss the body a lot at points, but he has kind of tightened it up a lot more lately than I've personally been giving him credit for. Yeah, like the cannon of a shot for his first of his 2 goals and then firing home the second one, like offensive dynamo, haha, like that's fun and that's great. But his game has been a lot more sound in general lately. So I think he deserves more credit than maybe what I and others have been giving him as of late. I would like to see some more consistency, but this was a nice game from him despite the loss overall.
Yeah, he's a notch above Holt and Petry for sure. He just gets lumped in with them because he was part of that rotation for a while, and he's not stepped up to the level of the 4 guys above him. So it's a natural grocery stick on the blue line. So it makes for easy conversation.
Yeah, Islanders got the empty net goal, 5-3 final, and as Brad said, reffing a factor. Detroit's sloppy play, defensive lapses a factor, just overall disjointed, and Alex Lyon didn't bail him out, so that was a loss that against an opponent that they would have wanted back. But again, no panic. It's off a 6-game win streak. You're going to lose eventually.
Yep.
It's totally fine. And then Detroit had Florida on Saturday afternoon, and we knew this would be an important game, but unfortunately a tough game. If you have not watched the Florida Panthers lately, that game would have given you a window into why a lot of people are not just saying they are going to be cup contenders, but maybe even cup favorites. And after watching them that game, I think, yeah, they're up there for me. They might be my pick. I think they're the most likely to come out of the East right now. And not just because they have a lot of points in the standings, because of the way they're playing hockey, you can understand they're in playoff mode right now.
Yeah, they check a lot of the boxes that you would expect from a team that's going to win the Stanley Cup. And one of my big takeaways as a secondary opinion from that game is I think we all owe Paul Maurice a huge apology. Man, that is a really well-structured, systematic team. They stick to what they are, which is aggressive. Mm-hmm. Their penalty kill was phenomenal.
Crazy.
I had anxiety and the puck wasn't even on my stick. I'm like, I'm going to lose the puck because they bear down on you so hard.
Every time Patrick Kane entered the zone and did that little lateral pass to the winger, they were all over that immediately. There was no room to make plays.
No.
Maurice had a quote about the way his team plays, and watching it, he's absolutely right. He's like, we're going to give up a couple good chances, not many, but a couple really good ones. And if you don't bury them, it's going to be a long night for you. And that is exactly how this game played out, because there were times their over-aggressiveness burned them. Mm-hmm. It led to 2 Patrick Kane breakaways. It led to Alex DeBrincat having the entire slot to himself and ringing it off the post. They didn't go in, and it was a long night for Detroit.
Yeah, unfortunately, Bobrovsky probably plays better against Detroit than anyone else in the league. Like, even the Kane breakaway where he tried to slide it between Bobrovsky's 5-hole while he got him moving, I know that was a prime opportunity. Like, yes, grade A chance, breakaway, Patrick Kane, the hottest, offensive player on the Red Wings right now. Watching that, it didn't even scare the back of the net for me. I think Bobrovsky was so solid the entire time. That was just, he was on and the Detroit wasn't beating him.
The irritating part about that breakaway is he had him. He just missed. He just missed his spot. Bobrovsky went for the poke check. Kane got around it. The 5-hole was wide open. And he just hit about 4 inches on the pad away from where he wanted it to go.
So 4-0 final by the Florida Panthers. Shut out Detroit, outshot them 37-21 officially. And in general, I think there's a spectrum of belief on why this game went how it did. We were talking before. I think I'm a little harder on the Red Wings on this one specifically than you are, Brad. But everyone has a universal opinion of the Florida Panthers are a tough opponent, and they came in and played their game. And, the context of Detroit needs these points to continue their momentum in the playoff race is true. But at the same time, you almost can't be mad if you're losing to the best team in the league right now. Like, this is akin to the third period against the Edmonton Oilers when they just decided they were the Edmonton Oilers in that loss for Detroit.
Yeah, for 35-ish minutes of that game, I thought the Red Wings were doing fine. they weren't generating a ton of offensive chances because the Florida Panthers are just that good. And you could see it. It wasn't that I had any huge criticisms of what the Red Wings were doing to that point in the game. They were just outclassed. They were just playing a better team, and it showed. And the game was close. They weren't getting waxed. The shot differential hadn't exploded yet. And, again, Detroit wasn't getting a ton of great chances, but neither was Florida. They had more, but not by a significant margin. And then the wheels came off the bus. And the Florida Panthers, and we've talked about this at length, and we've used Tampa as the shining example of this forever, and I think Florida's going to be the shining example of this now. To be a good cup contender, your roster needs to be full of stars who are pricks. And Florida, Tkachuk, you can call him a rat, you can call him more of like the Nick Cousins, coward type, because Tkachuk doesn't answer the bell, whatever. I don't care where you fall on that spectrum for this point. Cousins is going to piss you off. Tkachuk's going to piss you off. Sam Bennett's going to piss you off. They have a lot of other, even Oliver Ekman-Larsson was being a little irritant on the ice all game, which just buying into the Florida system. And when you snap, do you know what they do? They laugh at you and go score on the power play.
Yeah.
That's where the Red Wings have evolved, but not all the way. Years ago, for the last however many years, we kept talking about how the Red Wings game in, game out would fail the punk test. Teams would, be physical with them, fight them, do a lot of what Florida was doing, and Detroit would just back off. They look scared. They're not stepping up. They have no... Now we're seeing a lot of it this year where the guys get into it. Look at what Chiarot was doing last night. DeBrincat's had a couple fights. Larkin's in the middle of everything. And you go up and down the roster, and now the Red Wings are starting to be a roster full of pricks. But the difference is between where Florida's at on this scale and Detroit's at, Florida knows how to turn it off. They know how to turn away. They know how to let it go. Detroit didn't. They got goaded into a lot of garbage, and they fell right into it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I agree with you that it was close in terms of the balance of the play. I did, even when it was 0-0 heading into the second period, I thought, this is still, Florida's controlling this. Detroit's not really getting a lot established. That first penalty kill by Florida, I was like, this is some kind of day for Detroit, and I'm worried it's going to be all 60 minutes of it. Even going into the third period, down 2-0, I thought, if Detroit plays the same way they did for the first 40, they're not going to win. But the good news about Detroit this season is their last 20, a lot of games, has been among the league's best. That third period goal, the first goal, Evan Rodriguez, within the first 5 minutes of the third, that was a dagger. And Detroit, they just were dumb in their own zone, wouldn't get it out. A lot of disjointed play, they weren't just making the smart play to get it out. They were getting a little cute with it. They were getting beat down low. It just was, you could see that goal coming from a mile away. And then at that point in my mind, the game was already lost. Now, the rough stuff started early. We're heaping all of this praise onto the Florida Panthers right now. Don't get it twisted. At Red Wings fans, for good reason, their blood was boiling watching the Panthers. They pissed you off, and that is part of their game. Tkachuk went in for a hit on Walman. It might have been a high hit, and he just kind of floated into it pretty stupidly, and Walman saw it and tabletopped him and flipped him, which was great from Walman. But then the Panthers immediately, and this was intentional, were all over Walman, going after him all game, and they used that as their catalyst to incite the physical aspect of the game that they brought to Detroit, even though it was Tkachuk who put himself in that position. But that, again, it's not about what's fair and what's not. It's about how do you get the boys going, and that's what Florida was doing. And it evolved into Ekman-Larsson throwing a punch at DeBrincat, who's already being held by one or two other Panthers. It evolved into Tkachuk, throwing slashes and then skating away. It evolved into Bennett, a lunatic after the whistle, walked away with offsetting penalties. Drives me insane the way the refs managed that game. But I think by the time the Red Wings were down 3-0, I think they already had lost. You can argue they had lost by the time they were down 2-0. So when Ben Chiarot did the maybe not so smart thing in terms of the scoreboard of dropping his gloves and going after Tkachuk, call me a caveman, but I didn't care. I was like, at that point, who cares? Make him pay for something, make him answer the bell on something, because this game is lost.
Yes and no. They started this garbage before it was 3-0, though. That's kind of where it gets me. Ben Chiarot officially snapped after that moment. But
he was every Red Wings fan.
The lead up was happening, and we as fans don't need to be rational. We can be as angry and throw as much hatred towards the Panthers as we want. We're not getting paid to win the game. The Red Wings have to have that switch that they don't seem to have yet. And yeah, I'm with you. Towards the end of that game, if you're playing a division rival and they've been running around being a bunch of rats very effectively all game, and you know the game is lost, go punch as many people as you want. I'm fully on board. 15 minutes left in the game, maybe not then. You still want to, you have to gain respect from these teams. And, you know, running around being a bunch of piss babies for the last 10 minutes, although fun and justified, not going to get you a lot of respect from that team because they know, well, we just handled you. At no point did you feel like you were going to win this game. And now when you come and try to run us, we're going to laugh at you.
They're going to do it again.
Yeah, 100%. So Florida has the book on how to rattle Detroit. So the next time they play, Detroit has to know it's coming and they have to respond differently.
I think the biggest takeaway for me from this game is, you know, it all started out with very tight checking from both teams. Not a lot was being generated. The Red Wings just couldn't keep into that track meet the whole game. And obviously, you know, there's elements like the refereeing was very interesting, and there were some additional minors assessed to Red Wing players where I was very confused why that might be occurring. And then,
what a diplomatic way to put it.
Yeah, we can't have a power play coming out of a scrum. It's not fair.
No.
And when Florida gets a power play, their power play is just an all-star team, and they made the Red Wings pay as soon as there were mistakes. And the execution from the Wings started to really go down the tank as the game progressed. Passing got atrociously bad. Outlet passes got atrociously bad.
What are you talking about? They were all tape to tape.
They were tape to tape. Unfortunately, the other one was the Florida Panthers defenseman standing on the blue line who thought he got a one-timer from Jeff Petry. It's so, you know what? People say, oh yeah, that's 6 games in 10 days. Team's looking tired. Yeah, sure, I'll buy into that a little bit, but everybody goes through that stretch, and I'm not going to cry for the other. We just talked about how Washington was on a back-to-back, and I was like, I don't feel bad for them, so I'm not going to sit here and feel bad for the Wings that they've played that many games in 10 days. It looked okay from the first 25 minutes of the game, and then to me, Florida just kind of played the perfect road game after that. They, you know, took what the Red Wings gave them, which turned out to end up being a lot. And Bobrovsky just did Bobrovsky things. And that was it.
So actually, before I get into the positive takeaways from this, the refs, and I'm going to do this and I'm just going to let it go because I only want to talk about the refs so much on one episode, but they managed that game terribly, period. I'm not saying they tilted the scale towards Florida. There wasn't a world where Detroit played the kind of game they did and they were going to win. And frankly, when Detroit had the power play, Florida was just dominating them. The puck was never settled in the Florida zone. But they did the cowardly thing of when someone would incite a scrum, very obviously incite a scrum, and you let a little bit go, you let the game play out, you let the guys figure it out, you know, the tempo of the game, what kind of narrative is going to be happening. I'm all for that. I'm a hockey player. I'm not saying, you know.
That's what game management is supposed to mean.
Yeah. But it was every single scrum that was started by a two-hander or someone like jumping face wash or punch after a whistle where nothing else happened, and they'd set offsetting minors. Like Bennett and Chiarot at one point, I was like, that one to me is nuts. And then the game got out of hand to the point where at the end they were doing that thing that refs do, which is where they just hand out 10-minute misconduct.
No, that's a Garrett rank thing.
I think a lot of refs do that when a game is out of hand.
Well, yeah, maybe it's just more of a thing because he lets a lot more games get out of hand.
And that's the thing. I'm like, you do that when a game is out of hand, but there are certain situations where it's not your fault. Like, let's say there's a high hit late and teams are just incensed. But that was building the entire time. And, you know, you're hitting Fabbri a 10-minute misconduct for getting face washed after the whistle. He didn't do anything. And it's fine. There's 3 minutes left. You understand that it's just to get him off the ice and to try to diffuse the situation. But it's a lost cause. They called too many offsetting minors, and by the time they called the extra penalties, they just flat out got it wrong. Walman getting 4 minutes and a misconduct was a joke. Like,
that was a whole nothing burger, really, the whole sequence of events.
Because what happens when you call too many offsettings in a game like this, and this is the only excuse I'm going to give the Red Wings. Again, don't think it would have had any impact on the game. But if you're a team like Florida, and Florida is very intentionally and effectively doing what they were doing, and they realize every time they do it, it's an offsetting call, why the hell would they stop?
They're going to keep taking the trades.
100%. They're going to handpick the guys they want to take off the ice at some point.
Yeah, and even if you're not, taking Seider off for Luosterainen or whoever, you're just going to, because like you said, Brad, if you're dominating open ice and you're controlling play, yeah, you'll take 4-on-4 all the time. Detroit's going to have a really hard time, generating any kind of offensive comeback. Again, it didn't really change the balance of the game. I think there were moments where I just didn't understand why Florida was getting away with what they did. But then Detroit, as Brad alluded to earlier, Detroit started to play the same game, and they got away with some, and then Detroit got some extras. It doesn't matter. Detroit lost because they were the worst team today, but that was just a terrible display of game management by the refs, and it became a gong show at the end. If you're handing Robbie Fabbri a 10-minute misconduct for existing at the end of the game, 9 times out of 10, that's your fault. And to me, that was just brutal from the refs. Also, they missed like 30 seconds of flat out 6-on-5 hockey, too many men by Florida. They weren't even close to being on the bench. Like, they were just, you were probably watching the game and going, man, Florida seems like they're everywhere. It turns out they literally were. Pathetic. That was just, I try not to give too much airtime to ripping on the refs, but that was a bad one. And I will bet anything they got a call from the head ref after that game or the next day to review, hey, here's the 15 things that you screwed up, to put it gently. What the hell happened out there? Because that was a joke.
Do you really think that call happened?
Yeah, I don't. No, I 100% think
this happens way too often in the NHL for me to think it's a problem they care to fix.
No, I think it's a problem they care to fix. My take is that I think the NHL is seeing a transition of the guard, and I don't actually know like the ages or the experience of the refs, but we've seen so many refs who have been around for a long time with a lot of tenure, who know how to manage these things, retire or leave.
It's growing pains.
And unfortunately, refereeing, it's a long time for that to kind of settle in. We've been seeing this a little bit more over the past few years, and it is growing pains is putting it nicely for sure. Anyhow, that's enough about the refs, I think. Good takeaways from this game, in my mind. I was talking to some people after the game at the Winged Wheel Podcast Night after party, and a couple of folks had some really good notes. Detroit got a good whiff of what playoff hockey is going to be like. If they make it this year, this is what they have to expect. Even if they're not playing Florida, like, they are going to get this kind of game a lot. Maybe not so much physicality. Maybe they'll keep it a little bit more reined in, but the stifling play, hard on the puck, hard on the body, not letting you play your game. Like Evan, you said, they read what Kane was going to do and they shut that down before it even started.
It gets worse in the playoffs because teams don't have to worry about the grind of the season anymore. They're like, okay, we need to focus on one team.
Yeah.
Who are their good players? How do they execute plays? And a team like Florida will shut that down pretty quick.
And the Red Wings didn't adapt at all that game.
No.
They, for how little offense they were generating, boy, did they sure pass up a lot of looks thinking that extra pass was going to be there, because in their defense, in a lot of recent games, it has been. Wasn't there tonight, and they didn't seem to realize that.
No. Florida did an excellent job keeping the puck to the perimeter, especially when Florida was on the penalty kill. How many times did Patrick Kane, come up from low to high on the cycle and have to cycle it back down because there was just nothing in the middle of the ice for the Red Wings to get to? It truly was a masterclass in how to play the penalty kill.
Yeah, and in quote-unquote playoff hockey, when games go like that, and you want to be a team like the Florida Panthers, and you want to beat a team like the Florida Panthers, all right, we're not generating anything the traditional way. Get that puck in the goalie's feet and send 3 guys at them like a missile. Like,
sometimes you got to just throw something on net, which the Red Wings seem... trust me, I'm not a shoot guy, but... maybe sometimes you just got to throw in a different look there and throw something to the net and see what happens.
Yeah, because if you get that game within 1, then maybe Florida thinks for a second before trying to start the next scrum, because if they then go down on the penalty kill, it's different. But yeah, you have to just generate your own break. And in a game where you were decidedly not allowed to generate offense the way you wanted, you got to throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. So Detroit got a whiff of that. You have to think Derek Lalonde and the Red Wings, the team leadership as well, will think, how do we adjust our game so the next time this happens, we're better prepared? You keep cooler heads. How do you adjust your play style? How do you respond physically? What does the punk test look like for you? What does answering it look like for you? And also, with the context of the trade deadline, you're going to assume that Steve Yzerman watched that and thought, wow, my want for, a quote-unquote nasty defenseman with snarl, Radko Gudas type or something like that. I would imagine that want is amplified. A guy who's been in the playoffs to do it, a guy who's played, the kind of game that the Panthers have played, because, you fight fire with fire at that point. And I think that might maybe amplify the want for something of that effect at the trade deadline for Detroit.
Yeah, it would make sense. We were doing that thought experiment at Harry's after the game with a bunch of guys. Not a lot of those available, so that might be tricky.
That's what I keep coming back to. Everybody keeps saying they want this, gritty, hard to play against defenseman, and I'm saying, who is the option? Who is the prime candidate?
It's based on the fact that not many are available. It's probably one that's going to be leaving a lot, left to be desired in terms of actual on-ice play, and the physicality is going to be more of a hallmark of what they do, which is not the most comfortable feeling, but I wonder if that's the direction Detroit goes. All right, we're going to talk about the playoff push in their standings, but we're going to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown, which I think is similar to what Evan's dressed for right now. So next time you're watching a hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for the Red Wings, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer and great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. Okay, so Detroit's playoff push. They lost 2 games. They were in the first wildcard seed heading into those 2 games, and unfortunately now they are still in the first wildcard seed. It's okay. Not ideal to lose 2 in a row, but you had just won 6. It's fine. Detroit is sitting at 72 points in 61 games played. The second wildcard seed is Tampa Bay, 72 points in 63 games played. So Detroit has 2 games in hand, and this is at the time of recording, so it might have changed by the time you listen. The Islanders are at 60 games played. The Capitals are at 60 games played, and they have 66 and 65 points respectively. And the Devils are at 61 games played, and they have 64 points. So Detroit they still hold the cards in their hand. They are 6 points back of the Leafs, and the Leafs have 1 game in hand on them. So that is less of a focus now. If you're looking at the playoff rates, it's more of a wild card push at the moment. It hasn't removed anything like in terms of the confidence or Detroit's pace. Again, losing 2 games in a row is not ideal, but Detroit had the margin. We talked a lot in our optimism on previous episodes is the cushion is good because now 1 weekend doesn't devastate you. Prashant Iyer put out some projections. Detroit is currently on pace for 97 points, and the current projected playoff cutoff is 91 points. So that's some cushion. A few games could change it, but that is some cushion. And models have them ranging anywhere from 60 to 74% probability in terms of making it if you're into that kind of thing. So Detroit is still, in a comfortable position. Not comfortable where they can rest easy, but a comfortable position where they can bounce back from this and not have to sit here and regret this weekend the same way they regretted the 2 Ottawa games last season.
Yeah, the only way that what happened the last 2 games that would make me feel uncomfortable is like if this week, for example, they had like Colorado and Vegas coming up.
Hey man, you're not giving enough respect to jumping in the Mullet Arena.
I got to give Arizona some respect. They did us a favor today by pumping the Capitals. So
yeah, keeping another wild card hopeful a little bit further away.
And I think the Devils got smacked today too. So this might just turn into a 4-horse race pretty quickly between Detroit, Tampa, the Islanders, and Philly for those last 3 spots, which if there's only 4 teams for 3 spots, that's math in Detroit's favor.
Here's what's coming up for Detroit. They have a few days off here. They're going to be playing on Wednesday in Colorado, 9:30 Eastern. We're actually going to drop our next episode before that game because it's going to be our official trade deadline preview. And then on Friday and Saturday, also on the road, back-to-back, they have Arizona at 9 p.m. Eastern and then Vegas at 10 p.m. Eastern. So a lot of travel. You're going to be on the road. It's a back-to-back. Vegas on the second half of a back-to-back isn't fun. And then a couple of days off, and they have Buffalo on Tuesday the 12th. But on the 8th, the day of the Arizona game, that's the trade deadline earlier that afternoon. Like a lot of moving parts and then a lot of moving parts off the ice. That's a tough stretch for Detroit. So losing 2 is fine. Ideally, you know, if you have the benefit of hindsight being 2020, you do differently in the Islanders game because that seemed more attainable to you, but you had the cushion for it. But they can't walk away from Colorado, Arizona, Vegas with, you know, 0 or 1 point or whatever. Like they need to steal some points here. Colorado's going to be tough on the road. Vegas is going to be tough on the road. Don't discount Arizona, who just broke that losing streak. Like they need to walk away with some points here to make these 2 losses seem more distant than they are.
1-1-1 feels like the realistic ideal.
If they could walk away with 3 points, you obviously want to do better than losing twice, but you walk away with a 500 points percentage and you can feel okay for a road trip on that part.
Yeah, I would agree. And Vegas and Colorado haven't been in great form the past little bit here, so hopefully they don't wake up when the Red Wings come to town. But, you know, if you can get a win against them and, you know, maybe Arizona as well, yeah, if you're walking away with more than half the points, you're probably okay on that little stretch this week.
Again, it's a thin silver lining, very, very thin silver lining, but Detroit had some time off because of the road trip to think about that Florida game. They had some time to practice. They had some time to have some conversations with each other about what they need to change because that's a big test for them, and that was a wake-up call.
You want to be a playoff team, you've got Florida, you got Colorado, you got Vegas. In the playoffs, you got to win on the road. So here's an opportunity to at least demo that a little bit and see if you got what it takes.
It's also like one thing to take away from Florida as well is playoff teams start playing like playoff teams before the playoffs. That's how they get ramped up. That's how they don't come in cold and rusty, and that's how they don't get caught off guard by going down 2-0 in a playoff series early. Like they get ready. You're right, Brad. Credit to Paul Maurice. So if Detroit has that test and they can draw something from it, then yeah, this 3-game stretch is going to be one hell of a litmus test, but it's going to be a litmus test. Overall, though, I'm not panicking. And I know on this show, we're not, you know, shy about being negative when we're actually negative. And I don't know that any 3 of us are feeling ultimately negative relative to, you know, the optimism we've had for the last couple episodes.
Yeah, and I was being a shithead about it. But if you look at their schedule past Vegas, it actually looks very, very favorable for a good stretch there. Not like necessarily games that you write off in a bunch of San Jose's and Chicago's, but no President's Trophy contenders for a while after that.
Yeah, they have Florida on the 30th, but
outside of that one, because they got a lot of the Islanders and teams of that category.
Yeah,
and you need to win those games.
Yeah, after the next road trip, they have Buffalo on the road, Arizona at home, Buffalo at home, Pittsburgh on the road, Columbus at home, Islanders at home, Nashville on the road. Like there's a mix in there, but not Florida, Edmonton every game, right?
A couple teams there where, you know, you can really break the hearts of their fans and end their season with some wins there. So yeah, March is a good mix of perennial contenders and teams who think that they still have a shot to make the playoffs. So if you can upset some fan bases, that's what you do.
After the Florida game, there's a stretch of 8 games where you could argue those are 8 teams that are at least statistically likely to not make the playoffs, with the exception of maybe Nashville.
All right. We'll see how the Red Wings do. Some other quick Red Wings news. Trey Augustine, man, what a season. What a season for both of Detroit's goalies so far in terms of their prospect system. They're in between the pipes line. Sorry, thank you. We've talked a lot about Cossa, but Trey Augustine just led MSU to a Big Ten regular season title as a freshman goalie, one of the top goalies in the country. He has just been outstanding all year, and what a turnaround from the era of Detroit, looking back fondly on Jonathan Bernier and having nothing to look forward to now they have Trey Augustine putting up, a .917 save percentage. He went 27-2 with state. Like, that is...
I think he made 42 or 44 saves in the last game too. So
yeah,
he had to. It wasn't like he was standing behind a stacked team and he was stopping 20 shots a game. Like, he had to work for that one.
They have, and we talked a lot with Sean Shapiro before the event. Actually, they have goalies of two different archetypes. Cossa, ultra athletic, huge goalie, kind of what GMs in the modern NHL love. And then they have Trey Augustine, who's by modern standards undersized, but just the results are, you cannot deny how good he is.
Yeah, and if you're going to be an undersized goalie, you have to be technically exceptional, and he is.
Yeah.
He is squared and centered to a lot of pucks. The one thing that Sean pointed out that I thought was super interesting, though, because traditionally, if you look at smaller goalies like UC Saros, they are really aggressive, feet outside of the blue paint, cutting off the angle, understanding that they need to get in front of it to make themselves bigger. Augustine doesn't do that. He plays more of the Henrik Lundqvist almost on the goal line because he likes tracking the puck further into him type of goalie, which I don't know if that translates up levels, but the fact he's even able to do that at his size is supremely impressive.
All right. Let's get into the trade deadline. News first before we talk about some more rumors about what Yzerman and the Red Wings are looking for. The Tanev trade. That was a little bit surprising to me. Tanev ended up going to the Dallas Stars through the New Jersey Devils. Dallas gave up a second-round pick in 2024, a 2026 third that's conditional, that's only moved if Dallas goes to the Cup Finals this year, which is, they're one of the likelier teams, but that's a pretty heavy condition. And prospect Artem Grushnikov, who's just kind of like a bruiser-type former second-round pick. Devils retained some salary to get Tanev to have retained. They got a fourth-round pick from Dallas, and the Stars got essentially Chris Tanev at half retained. That seemed, it's not terrible for Calgary. Like, they got a second. They got the prospect that they probably liked to some degree, although he wasn't exactly high on Dallas's prospect charts. But I felt like there's more juice to squeeze in this one. I don't have no idea why they went so early, and I feel like they could have gotten more done.
That's the thing for me. I don't think the price that they were going to get was going to be substantially more than this. It felt like waiting to closer to the deadline might have been advantageous to maybe catch a team panicking. Because as we talked about, Yzerman was looking for a Tanev type. Not many of them out there. You could have caught a team panicking. And, I think Craig Conroy said they did have an offer with a first involved, but it involved taking another contract back, and they were not about that.
There's a fit for Detroit in that hypothetical.
I know. I thought the exact same thing when I heard that. But not that I would have wanted Detroit to do that necessarily, but I understand the logic there. But Calgary's owner is notoriously cheap. So I can understand why this is the bigger appeal to them out of the two offers. Your team entering a rebuild, if the Red Wings were in Calgary's position now and when they were in the rebuild and you turned down the better pick because you didn't want to bring on a contract, we'd have flipped the table. But different ownership, different scenarios. So I get it. The return's fine for me for a rental defenseman who doesn't produce much, if any, offense. It's just, if you have time, use it. I don't get doing this the week before.
And he was like the head of that market too. So yeah, you're clearing the logjam for everyone else.
Yeah, it was when I saw what came through as well. I was surprised that it wasn't as much. You'd think if Calgary was going to make a trade a week in advance of the trade deadline, the offer would just be too good to say, no, we're going to wait to see what everybody else comes back with. So did Calgary make the wrong move here? Was it premature, or is the market not what everybody thinks it is? Is it not as hot as what people are expecting it to be? I don't know. This one I was very surprised at.
If Tanev was a little bit more open, and I don't know how him and his agent handled it about, hinting to teams where he would extend and where he wouldn't, they probably could have got a little bit more out of it.
You're not allowed to do that, though.
No, that's right. And they would never.
No.
I don't know. I'm still of the mind that you still wait, because even if teams say they're not paying a first, they're not paying this prospect, whatever, time changes things. And
they will if team X, Y, or Z in their division go out and get a big name ticket. They'll then pay the first.
Or if one of your top 4 defensemen gets hurt.
So Toronto, who would have been a fit for Tanev, and I think a lot of their fans wanted one, and they've been a little bit precious about their picks. Well, they went out and got a defenseman of their own, which is, for the second time, Elias Lyubushkin.
Didn't he get lit up and hurt last night, too?
Yeah, Rempe took a charge, and he seems to not be too bad. It was a head injury. It looks like it's not terrible. But speaking of terrible, Elias Lyubushkin this year.
He's not good. And Chris Tanev is. And there were rumors about Tanev to the Leafs seemingly all season. Either Tree Living and Conroy have some bad blood, or that's some horrible mismanagement on the Leafs part, because they could have matched that and beat it comfortably. And where they're at in their contention window, they should have. They are not a team that is waiting. They cannot afford to be patient anymore. They need to start pushing all in. And you're telling me Elias Lyubushkin was the answer, but they weren't willing to pony up for Chris Tanev? Man,
I think there is bad blood between Calgary and Tree Living. I think that might be a little bit of a blockade.
It had to have been.
All right, elsewhere in the NHL, in terms of the trade deadline, there's more coming out. The price on Gensel, they're looking for prospects more than picks, Pittsburgh, which is a little surprising, but also not, because they're thin. Like, their prospect pool is thin.
Pittsburgh doesn't know what to do because they haven't drafted anyone in the first 2 rounds. Like, we don't know how to do this. We'll let you do it, and then we'll just see what you have available.
They're like amateur scouting?
Yeah.
Oh, we look at public draft lists in the 6th round.
We just download the cap friendly the EP Prospects 700 page book, and we do a little test on that at the end of the season.
Anyhow, that's it's notable on Gensel. I think he makes him more attainable for teams with really high-end prospect pools, like, for example, maybe Detroit.
What else would you have to package with Berggren to get Gensel?
That's what I was thinking. Berggren's going to be the start of that.
And he's very close to NHL ready, which would appeal to... Well, he is NHL ready, so that would appeal to Pittsburgh. Not for this year, but going forward. I mean, if the secondary prospect's not that significant with Berggren, I'll take him as a rental. He's not going to be, and someone will outbid, and someone's going to want to sign and trade him. So there's still a million complications that make it likely Detroit's not at the final table for him.
But Detroit almost has too many good prospects, so you don't hate it. Hanifin, his preference is to head to the state of Florida. It looks like Lightning is the most likely team, as has been reported. And
big tax evasion guy.
Yeah. Well, it's not evasion if they don't tax you. So
yeah, that's fair.
That's why he likes it. And Markstrom is seemingly, he's not fond of the way things went down so far with Calgary and him being on the market and all the noise around him. I still think, I don't know whose fault it is that deal didn't get done, but I still think the Devils should have done that 20 games ago. But Markstrom doesn't seem like he's marked to be in Calgary for very long.
Yeah, but they have no rush with that. The free agent market for goalies this summer is atrocious.
Yeah.
So if they don't get an offer they like by the deadline, they'll still be the belle of the ball for goalies in the summer.
I think it's an off-season thing. And then from Detroit, the rumors on Detroit in terms of, what you hear and then what's being reported publicly as well, I still firmly believe that I think Steve Yzerman is asking about a lot of things, maybe some minor, but mostly in terms of big moves. Like, just because Detroit is headed to the playoffs, likely but not guaranteed, and they can sniff it, and it's their first time going in a while, doesn't mean that Yzerman's going to blow up the team or high-end picks or prospects for no reason, for rentals just to throw away. Mind you, Yzerman is obsessed with getting to the playoffs. Like, it is a massive, massive priority for 2 reasons. One, business. We all know. Nobody's stupid. Butts and seats. That is huge for the team. The LCA has not seen a playoff game yet. So that isn't a part of it, whether or not anyone tells you it is or not, it is. But secondly, and I actually believe more importantly, getting this team playoff experience will be formative in getting them attuned to what they have to do to be a competitor, not just a playoff, possibility in terms of wild card spot. I mean a competitor. Look at how Florida better structured themselves after their cup run. That translated into this season. You are seeing the effects of the lessons they learned last year, this season. Yzerman knows the value of playoff experience. Getting Seider there, getting Larkin there again, getting Raymond there, this matters. So he's obsessed with getting to the playoffs. But still, I think he's going to try to see what he can do on the blue line for not a short-term solution, but the blue line is hurting, and it has been hurting all year. I think a top 6 forward would be the cherry on top to the offensive this season. And, short to medium term, maybe goaltending too. I think it's all on the table.
Yeah, he's going to have one of the more active phones this week. I don't know what it's ultimately going to lead to. It could be a lot of big game hunting that just doesn't come to fruition, like New Jersey and Calgary with Markstrom. Could be a lot of deals like that maybe fall through with Detroit. But I'm all for it. I'm still of the mindset, no premium assets for a rental. Don't care who it is. Secondary assets for a rental? Sure.
Yeah.
You want to give up a ton of premium assets for a long-term solution? 100% on board. But just please don't mortgage the future for 3 months of a guy.
I'm sort of curious what St. Louis is going to do with some guys on their team. Where are they trending? Do they think they can retool on the fly? Are they going to tear it down? A guy like Robert Thomas is having a hell of a season. And I don't know what his contract looks like right now.
8.5 for a long time or something very close to that.
So, I don't know what St. Louis is doing in terms of their short and long-term goals. Is he a guy, you look into? Jordan Kyrou has very much had conflicts with management in St. Louis. He was booed by the fans at one point this season. Is that a guy you kind of ruffle around on? I think there's lots of options. It's just, trying to connect the dots and find out what everybody wants. And if you can all agree upon things, that's always the most difficult part.
You said Robert Thomas, and I was like, that I just don't, that would seem insane for St. Louis to do that.
Well, look at what Florida did. They traded Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar and brought in Matthew Tkachuk, and everyone thought that was the most devastating move of all time, and now they're favorites. Like, sometimes you got to make crazy moves like that.
And that's the thing. Like, I think that's what Yzerman's going for. I don't think he's trying to do just anything. Like,
to be able to pull those off at the trade deadline, though, is wild. That would be insane.
That's getting out of the car sprinting and not stumbling over. Like, it's hard to do.
I would agree that an emergency podcast would be required.
Oh my God. I don't think you've ever said that out loud.
I've never said that in my life.
I do think that's the general tack from the Red Wings. You do something big if you can do it, because you can see how good this team is, how much better they are than the bad teams, and how much worse they are than the true contenders. And I also think that you're not going to force it, and you're not going to do something just to do something. Derek Lalonde said the move might be to look internally in the organization, because look at the guys going in Grand Rapids right now. And I believe him.
Yeah.
So
I don't think he would say that publicly if the team didn't believe that.
No. I know we've said this a lot of different years, but this year more than any other, I genuinely believe everything is on the table for Detroit, and it could be like the range of possibilities is wide open, from they do literally nothing to they make a massive move and all of a sudden Jacob Chikrin's a Red Wing. Like, I think that's all on the table, and I think Yzerman is knocking on a lot of doors, and the work is going to continue in the offseason even if he doesn't get something done now. And it could be at any of the 3 positions. So more in our next episode, which will be our official trade deadline preview episode. You never know. These few days off, Yzerman might take that time to make a deal, but team on the road, you never know. But the trade deadline preview episode is one of our special ones every year, so look forward to that one. And as Evan steps away, he's been summoned for jury duty, I'm sure, something, Batman, bat signal, whatever.
He's going to court, but he's not on the jury.
Yeah, we don't know which side of the court he's on. Let's jump into some NHL news. That Petterson contract. I'm glad we had our fun, and we said, obviously, like, this is just being insane. The most likely outcome is Vancouver keeps him. And they did. And I honestly would have thought that Vancouver kept him by saying, hey, look, we're coming to the table. we either have this trade offer from Carolina, which included a lot of premium pieces, hypothetically, or let's get this done now and let's get rid of the noise because it's at a fever pitch and this is a distraction at this point. And that was all within the realm of possibility. And I thought, okay, and then what Vancouver's going to do is offer him infinity dollars. I think they got him under market.
They did.
8 years at $11.6 million is not enough for Elias Petterson in my mind.
No, not even close. And I mean, he was an RFA at the end of the year, so it's not like there was the risk of losing him for nothing in the offseason. So bit of bargaining power there. And I know a lot of people were comparing it to the Nylander contract, but that is a pretty key difference is the Leafs were at risk of losing him for nothing at the end of the season. Pending UFA versus pending RFA is substantial. Yeah, I thought for sure that was going to be 12 something. For sure.
He is more than I get it. You know, Nylander had more leverage UFA, but he is more than $100,000 better per year than Nylander, and I'm a big Nylander guy.
And he's also younger, is he not?
25 years old. He's not 26 until November. 11.6. Call me insane, but I thought high 12s were within the realm of possibility. I really did. I thought high 12s were within the realm of possibility, and I would have thought it's high, of course. Petterson will have a lot to live up to, of course, but if you're Vancouver, you have to do what you have to do to get it done. And for Petterson to run the clock out this late, I thought that's what maybe it was. It's either he doesn't like being in Vancouver or he wants way more money because of all the crap he's had to put up with. Turns out neither.
Well, this was the hypothetical that came to my mind that always reinforced how good a deal it was. Us, as Detroit Red Wings fans, if we were put in Steve Yzerman's shoes and you told me there's a top 10 number one center in the NHL going to market and he was interested in Detroit, how much are you willing to pay for that?
12.5, without a doubt.
I would have went up to 14.
Yeah, like top 10 player in the world, and you're paying the premium of you have to compete with everyone else on a free market, like no RFA, like UFA. Yeah.
I'd have found a way to save the extra $2 million somewhere else on the roster. I would have paid whatever the hell I had to get that guy on my team.
You overpay for your superstars.
Yeah, and Vancouver got him at a discount. It's a tiny piece of business.
And don't overpay for every superstar, Toronto, but especially if you need. How annoyed are you if you're a Leafs fan? Again, the situations are different. The leverage is different, RFA versus UFA and all that. But if you're a Leafs fan and you watch Marner and Matthews and Nylander just walk themselves to every single phase of their contract negotiations, favorable term, favorable dollars, they don't leave a lot on the table. They get everything they want. And then you see Petterson, who lives in a market that at times is somehow more insane than Toronto, and he signs that deal. People were worried that he was going to do what Matthews did, a short-term deal to jump in and capitalize on the next, big leaps in the cap. And he is still very young and he could sign, 8 years at 14 point something. Look, $11.6 million is nothing to scoff at. It's not like they got him for $9 million. It's not crazy under market, but I think it's significant enough. It's almost enough per year to own a detached home in Vancouver.
Is it?
But yeah, I credit to Rutherford and Alvin in Vancouver. I was not familiar with their game, I'll say. Like that could have been a brutal situation. And not only did they just get it done, they somehow got it done at a rate that nobody really expected. Credit to them. Other side of the coin, in terms of player futures, Kuznetsov, now a AHL player. I think the most handsomely paid AHL player of all time, if I read that correctly.
Jeez. Talk about a career devolving very rapidly. The Caps won the Cup in 2018? And he was very close to winning the Conn Smythe instead of Ovechkin. And 5.5 years later, he's in the AHL.
You talk about what personality and passion and drive mean for a player. Even the most talented players who have established themselves, if they don't keep that, their careers can fall apart. And he cleared waivers. Like they put him on waivers and he cleared. Teams know you don't want that in your room. If Kuznetsov is being waived, it's because it is mission critical, worst case scenario.
And he hasn't been playing well. The NHL, as we've learned over time, will forgive a lot of things if you are good. He is not.
All right. Let's save the Rempe piece because I want Evan to be here for that one. And it seems like he's going to have 10 more fights before the next time we talk as well. Just a note, it looks like Winnipeg is getting some attention in terms of their season ticket holder drop to the point where Gary Bettman's making visits. He's had to put out a statement to say that he believes in that market and everything, which is what he has to say, whether he does or not. And it's the right thing to say. People are already angry because they're like, you died on the hill of saving Arizona, and you still are, but Winnipeg has falters for a little bit, and all of a sudden you're in there. I will say this has been happening for a little while with Winnipeg. If you remember that email they put out last year, it's kind of cryptic. Essentially, like, if you want hockey in Winnipeg, you need to be coming to games. That's a good team. That's one of the best teams in the NHL, and they're not seeing that translate into season ticket sales and things like that. And it's a small arena. It's just like not the smallest arena in the league because of Arizona, but that is not a 20,000 seat arena. They need to be like, that is concerning. The Red Wings right now, the LCA is more full than it's ever been because the team is good. And with Winnipeg this good, in the face of not being projected to be this good, and they still can't fill the arena and sell more season tickets, that is concerning.
I have two thoughts on this. The first one, if you look at Winnipeg ticket prices, they have not dropped the price of season tickets, even though anybody with an economics degree will be able to articulate what's going on in the market right now. And two, as it relates to Gary Bettman, even though it is a very real problem, I don't want to hear a word from him on this until the Arizona thing's resolved. It is so infinitely stupid that you're focusing on anything but Arizona right now.
And you know what? Owners will feel the same way.
No, 100%. You look at Winnipeg and, the garage is malfunctioning. You look at the neighbor's house. It's on fire. We should probably fix that garage. It's so stupid.
All right. Very quickly here. Winged Wheel Podcast Day at the LCA. Obviously, the game afterwards was a bummer, but that event was, as they all are, but especially this one, that was such a blast. First off, these hats. We did the same caps that we did in the past with the Red Wings logo on front and the Winged Wheel Podcast logo on the side. The officially co-branded licensed NHL gear with the Winged Wheel Podcast, which is still so surreal to say. But we did it in white this time as opposed to black. These look sharp, man.
Oh, they're clean.
These are clean as hell. So very excited that folks were able to get their hands on those. And shout out to the Detroit Red Wings, like phenomenal working with them every single time, of course. But they were able to move mountains and get the Alex DeBrincat bobbleheads, one of them on our podcast table right there. Because obviously that line starts very early to get the bobbleheads on those kinds of giveaways. And because our event started, at noon, they were able to get all of our, Winged Wheel Podcast night or day ticket buyers a bobblehead when they came in. So just because they were at this event, which was still a Red Wings, licensed and sanctioned event, they didn't miss out on their opportunity to get the bobblehead. So thank you to the Red Wings for arranging that. That was very, very cool to see. And we were fortunate to have Ken Daniels back on the show. And for the first time at a Winged Wheel Podcast Day live show, Daniela Bruce. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was nice of her to step away in this whirlwind of everything that's been going on with the Red Wings right now, because as she talked about, when vibes are high, it's crazy. And it was really good for her. And it was great meeting all of you who came out to the event. It never ceases to amaze me when I look out in that building and it's stuffed with people wanting to listen, and it's nuts. And we were joking before the episode, every Sunday after the event, I have that, do I have a throat infection or is my voice just worn out from talking to everybody? Because it genuinely hurts. And every year I never know.
Our only regrets in terms of things that we could do, because we couldn't get it on the ice, or we could, but Florida would have won 10-0 in the first period. We wish we had more time just to talk to every single one of you. So if we didn't get a chance to shake your hand and say thank you for coming, please know that we wanted to. And for all of you who we saw for the first time or saw for multiple events now, like, it means the world. Right before we hit record, our good friend of the show, Joseph, handed me a card, and I saw that it was addressed to three of us with our nicknames. And I put it behind me because we had to start recording right away. We were on the clock. Joseph thought I did it because, I thought it was a joke. I was like, no, I believe that I should be reading this. But I
did. When they handed it to me, I was like 50% convinced it was a glitter bomb.
I should have opened it before because it was signed by like everyone. It was a congratulations for our 9-year anniversary of the show. It was extremely touching.
Oh, it was awesome.
Thank you guys. That is
how dare they make me emotional?
I know. Go away. Screw off. That was very nice. On the show, we talked about, I think it was cool for people to hear from Ken right away, right after the Chicago game, because we've been talking, like, it's been great to see national media give Ken and Mick their flowers for that goal call. And the moment I opened with like, all right, Ken, that goal call, the room just exploded with cheers. So that was very cool to see as well. So yeah, Winged Wheel Podcast Day at the LCA. It's our last one for this season. We're excited to do them again next year in Detroit and Grand Rapids. Thank you all so much. Thank you to the Red Wings and to all of you, and for everyone who came around at the concourse to grab merch from the merch table. Evan and Catherine were
in the 15 minutes that we had any before it all ran out.
Yeah, we had the koozies and the lanyards and other stuff, and it was meeting new people there. Very cool. So again, just like having the Winged Wheel Podcast table under the Gordie Howe mural in the LCA, it is like very pinch me. So it's as cool as you guys might think it is. I promise you, we're even more blown away by it. So thank you. Also want to recognize very quickly, Sean Shapiro, not just part of the Winged Wheel Podcast content universe, host of Expected by Whom alongside Prashanth Iyer, movie star. He is an actor as a goaltender in a new beer league hockey movie called The Late Game. So Sean Shapiro is in that, featuring a lot of other people you might recognize. It's now available on Prime Video. Also, there's Late Game merch. We handed out some posters. We're going to give away a jersey, which we'll show you. Follow us on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. We'll show you what the jersey looks like. We'll be giving that away to a Winged Wheel Podcast listener. But Sean also arranged for a discount for the Late Game merch at thelategame.com using the code Winged Wheel. So grab your Late Game merch and check out the movie. Very, very cool to have a real life movie actor amongst us.
I cannot wait to put on my critic's hat and nitpick the hell. No, I'm kidding.
Does he have an IMDb page? Does Sean have an IMDb page?
I'm finding. Do you got it? I'm going to look it up if you don't.
You look it up while I transition us into overtime. Let's jump into overtime, folks. This segment where we take questions and comments from our listeners. And it's brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, again, the ticket giveaways, the Discord, and the bonus episodes, all of that and lots more. And you help support Winged Wheel Podcast nights and days with the Grand Rapids Griffins and the Detroit Red Wings. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation as well as grow the show. Did you just show me that he has
an IMDb page?
That's incredible.
Sean Chamberlain Shapiro.
No.
Yeah.
Chamberlain? That's amazing. Sean, why have we not been referring to you as Sean? Oh my God.
Oh yeah. His nickname now is Wilt.
That is so good. Anyhow, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Let's take a question here from Mormon Sidevinson. Says, we hear a ton about defense prospects like Edvinsson and Axel Sandin Pellikka, but it seems like Andrew Gibson has been performing really well. There's not much buzz around him. As a big right-handed defenseman that was a recent second-round pick, why isn't there more chatter about his potential? Two reasons. One, he's further away, and Detroit has more immediate prospects. And second, because he should be getting more attention.
He should be, but also, like, not to splash cold water on the situation, a 19-year-old defenseman having a very strong season in the OHL is not rare.
It's what you need to see for someone in his position.
Yeah, it's what you want, but he's still a longer shot than he is not, just by the nature of prospects and their development path.
Yeah, but Gibson he has been doing well. So, and again, for the type of defenseman that he was projected to be when he was drafted, it's cool to see that part of his game advance. So with the Sioux Greyhounds this year, he has 40 points in 59 games. So good for him. That's, it's not Ryan Ellis out there, but that was an aspect of this game where you're like, is there anything to be said about what he can contribute on that front? How is he going to translate and move up? And with that age in the OHL, he needed to do it, and that's what he's doing so far. Yeah,
like for context, when the Elias Lindholm trade went down with Vancouver and Hunter Brustevich went back the other way, a lot of the talk around Brustevich in terms of value to that trade was, oh yeah, the tools are there. We're not sure it'll translate to the NHL. And Brustevich is a year older than Gibson, but playing in the same league, and Brustevich is damn near leading the league in scoring as a defenseman. So like just for some context.
All right. Walt Partlow says, are advanced analytics showing us the weaknesses of the Red Wings, or are the Red Wings showing us the weaknesses of advanced analytics?
Both.
It's both.
It made me, like, the Florida game was a shining example of Detroit struggling to generate offense, which they have done for several stretches this year, which isn't uncommon, which is what the analytics are throwing up as a red flag. The one thing it has made me look up, and I know we've had a lot of discussion on it in our one group chat, which is what each goal is assigned in the expected goal model.
Yeah.
It's made me lose a little bit of faith in that metric. I understand the totality of it is you're just, throwing some odds out there, and the larger picture does paint a little bit, but the real answer is both.
It's also a third part of this. It's not the analytics themselves. It's the way they're used and the declarations that are made that are attached to it. Because often, someone will cite some statistics and they'll package them together in a way that looks like it goes together if you don't know what you're looking at, but doesn't really make sense. And then they'll draw a conclusion from it that doesn't actually make sense based on what you're looking at. And that's where I really struggle with some of the opinions that are out there on the Red Wings. I'm like, you can't be declaring, that they're a bad team because their strengths right now are special teams, goaltending, blah, blah, blah. You can say those are weaknesses that are going to potentially get exposed come playoff times. That's fair. But if you're saying they're here and that's lucky and it's a fluke, you just simply aren't understanding the on-ice play or the numbers, either one. So there's a third component, and it's the interpretation of the analytics, and that's where I think analytics get a bad name unjustifiably, in my mind. Reed says, which teams would you reckon have the overall best constructed roster? This would include contract prices and lengths for longer-term success.
Ooh, so if we're going into the long term, that really makes this question a lot trickier because, who's coming off ELCs, who's already on their big deal, who's expecting a raise soon.
Florida's up there.
Yeah, Florida. Tkachuk and Barkov are signed for a bargain. Ekblad's not getting paid a whole hell of a lot. Bobrovsky's contract leaves a little to be desired, but hey, if he plays like he did yesterday, you're great. Florida would be up there. Colorado still. Cale Makar's contract alone makes them worthwhile on that one.
Tampa Bay has probably a $12.5, $13 million player for $9.5 for 3 more seasons.
Yeah, but then when you look at Sergachev, Cirelli, a lot of their secondary contracts, good players, very good players, but a lot of those dollars are starting to add up, not to what they're worth on the on-ice value.
They're late stage.
Yeah, and the age of their players doesn't lead you to have a whole hell of a lot of faith there. Yeah, man, this is a tough one because most of the teams that immediately jump to my mind are old, and I don't think that's conducive. So I'm going to go Florida, Colorado, Dallas.
Yes.
Dallas is the answer. Dallas is 1,000% the answer.
Jim Nill, man.
As soon as that, Dallas is the answer.
Soft Dump in the corner says, does anyone know how stats counting is done? Is it per arena or centrally done? And why didn't that person draft Seider on their fantasy squad? I'm watching him finish checks, but somehow get actual hits, and they aren't counting. I think I found the shadow government of the sports betting world. It is done per arena for the most part, and it is wildly inconsistent.
To be fair, on hits specifically, the NHL did an audit of them this year and altered the stats mid-season to make them a little more reflective of what they actually are. Like, who is the big culprit of it? The Islanders. Their hit counts at home were insane.
Yeah.
So there were some adjustments that needed to be done.
To me, like hits, yes, but also like shots on goal. And I don't mean just like marking where it came from and what kind of shot, because that affects the analytic models that scrape that information. I mean like what they actually count as a shot or a shot on goal. Like, it's gotten more refined over the years, but it's still.
Yes, some arenas, if it hits the goalie, it's a shot on net. And other arenas, that came from outside the blue line, piss off. Don't even ask me if that's a shot on net.
It is. I think that's the next step of what the NHL can do to clean things up around the edges, especially as sports betting has come in, because they're going to want that, as you just mentioned. Simon Says 27 says, why does every player mentioned in the trade deadline around the league have Toronto as a destination? Every time I read that, I ask, when are they getting the cap space? Am I missing something?
Look at the size of their media market, look at the size of their fan base, and there's your answer.
Yep. It's the Dallas Cowboys. It is, Manchester United. That's what they are.
Someone is going to have the idea and they're going to throw it out there publicly. And then it's out there.
Don Bonderley, king of the dirty song, says the Jared Goff chants need to stop. I love the Lions and love the chants when the Lions were in the playoffs, but it's over. Now the Red Wings are in a playoff race and we need to chant the names of Wings players. There was a Larkin chant the other night and I loved it. What are your thoughts?
I don't mind it.
I understand. I agree. You have a Michigan-born captain who is leading this team back to hopefully the playoffs, and you would like to see him get more attention. They chant Patrick Kane plenty. To me, it's more of like a reflection of just the hype and energy that has been in Detroit as a sports town since the Lions made the run. And though it might not make sense, and I can understand not loving it now because it can almost seem disrespectful, to me, it's just a reflection of how much Detroit is in love with Detroit sports again. So I'm okay with it.
I think my biggest problem with it is why limit it to Jared Goff?
Panay Sewell doesn't roll off the tongue so easy.
Amon-Ra. Well,
we'll see what he signs for.
Hutch.
I might have heard that one when he slammed the beer. If we can't figure out the woo debate, which I'm not putting a stake in the ground on that one, staying far away from that one, the chants are just going to be naturally what they are. I wouldn't be surprised to see more Patrick Kane chants as they come up, especially if he resigns. And the last one here from Ariel, 2 questions. Any chance we'll get the recording from the Grand Rapids Winged Wheel podcast night? Yes. So here's the thing. You're going to get the recordings from the first and second Detroit Red Wings versions of Winged Wheel podcast nights from this season, as well as the Grand Rapids ones. We're going to release it for patrons first as bonus episodes at some point. It's just a matter of collecting the audio and working with some audio snafus. We did figure it out this year for the first time this event. It is much, much better for you, so the quality will be substantially better, and we will post that for our patrons. And second says, what are your favorite sweets or desserts?
Oh, God, that's going to be a hard one for me to narrow down because I have a bad sweet tooth. It is, everybody's got that crutch in their diet.
Yeah.
And I'm good with fruits, veggies, eating a well-balanced, all that garbage. My sweet tooth is bad. I had a killer. Where did we eat Friday night? I can't remember. I had a killer cannoli though for dessert. Cannolis always get me. I was in New York City. I was in heaven for 5 straight days. Any good cheesecake, any good apple pie. You know animes around here? The little, their peanut butter pie might be my favorite food on the face of the earth. Like, this is a problem for me. Donuts, I don't give a shit what kind. Fill me up.
Yeah. You know how Mika's the main character? It's her world. We're living in it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Mika-isms that Mel and I just say all the time. Like, whenever we go to Target, we're saying, because we're targeting something. When she was younger, that's what she thought it was called, Target. Mika one time told Melissa that she's a sugar girly because she has a sweet tooth.
She gets that from me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And she called herself a sugar girly. And Melissa then started calling me a sugar girly because I also have a big sweet tooth. And now all of my relatives and Mel's family, they're like, oh, Ryan's a sugar girly. They know to get me like candy and stuff. So Mika is she is the main character.
Big main character vibes. It's actually funny. Quick aside on that. Actually, I'll save it for overtime. Remind me to bring it up because I had a very, very funny interaction with Mika's best friend's mom after school the other day that revolves exactly around this conversation.
Anyhow, I'm a big lemon sweets kind of guy. I'm not big chocolate, vanilla. It's a little too rich for me, but I'm a big lemon sour candy. I'm a huge fan of. Most sweets I'll eat.
It's funny, for as bad of a sweet tooth as I have, I'm not a big candy guy.
Oh, I love it. I'm such a child.
I don't dislike them, and I will eat them if you present them to me, but they're not the type of sweets I go out of the way for. I'm like, you put a good bakery a block from my house, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I will be 300 pounds within a month.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. Again, sorry for our dead voices as we recover from Winged Wheel Podcast Day at the LCA. A huge thank you to all of you who came out to the Detroit Red Wings, to Ken, to Daniela, to all of our listeners, new and old, to all of our patrons. That card was, you guys are, for all of our fans, patrons or not, that card was incredibly touching. And to all of our Patreon supporters, we can't have done any of that without you. To all of our name level supporters on Patreon, Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Akefer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Brad's Lord and Savior Bradley Cleveland, Glenn Brabham, Coroner's Left Knee, Ashley Van Conant, Sea Lion, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. at the Cheesebag Navy, Carl, Brutina Nanaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al Qassem, I Still Don't Like Kane, I'm Ryan, 9-Year Hannah, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Marcus, Marlon Winchester, Matt K. Cannon Fodder, The Cheesebag Army, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Red Feather Desert Dogs, Ryan 50, Hannah Cap Hannah, Scott Martin, Screen Lube, That's What I Appreciate About You, The Cider House Rules, Walman's Elite Dancing D, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Iserplan Stan, Sam Bankson, AB, Adam Rose, Antonio Gracias, Axel Sandy Pelica, Bellingham Acid Balls, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Chuck Buff Chest, The Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton and Corey Parita, Darren Fick, D-Boss Snip Show, Derek James, Dungeon Master of Puppets, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, Gene, great to see you, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Adobo, JM Rhapsody, Jogan Rafferty, John Evans Derogatory, John Ingles, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Michigan Boy in Avs Country, Ophelia, Red Wing Tar Heel, Reed, Shahid Syed, Steven, The Hodag, The Mexinadian, The Hat 123, X, formerly AA Ron, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so much. We'll see you with the trade deadline preview.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.